Good morning. Working with a professional interior designer can offer numerous benefits. An interior designer can help you achieve a beautiful and functional space that reflects your style, enhances your lifestyle, and adds value to your home or business. I would like to welcome my listeners in the United States and all around the world. I am Vince Rocco, and this is Talking New York Real Estate. At this hour, interior design and staging play crucial roles in presenting New York City real estate in the best possible light. A well-designed and staged space can greatly enhance the appeal of a property, attracting potential buyers or renters. A good interior design ensures that the space is functional and meets the needs of its occupants. That involves optimizing the layout, flow, and organization of the rooms to create a practical and efficient living space. The visual appeal of a property is paramount. A skilled designer can select colors, materials, and furnishings that enhance the overall look and feel of the space. In New York City, where space is at a premium, it is essential to maximize the available square footage. Designers can employ clever storage solutions, furniture placement, and design techniques to make a property feel more spacious and open. Staging a property involves furnishing and decorating an apartment to showcase its potential to prospective buyers or renters who can envision themselves living in the space, and that could lead to faster sales or rentals. And as such, interior designers work closely with real estate agents to understand the target audience and tailor the design accordingly. By collaborating, they can create a design that aligns with the property's market value and target demographic. In the news this morning, a new generation is taking over some of New York's more storied real estate dynasties. Two families made major announcements about their company leadership last week. In one, Lisa Silverstein is taking over as CEO of her family's firm, which is simultaneously parting ways with Marty Berger. Berger was on his way out anyway, even though he has long been viewed as the heir apparent of Silverstein Properties, as noted by the Wall Street Journal. In other succession news, developer Bill Rudin announced that he is stepping down at the start of next year and turning the CEO role over to his two children, Samantha and Michael. Chief Investment Officer Neil Gupta will take over for Eric Rudin as president. Eric and Bill will stay on as co-chairs. And earlier this year, Richard Lefrak indicated that he was preparing to step back from his day-to-day operations at the firm while staying on as CEO. His sons Jamie and Harrison have taken on more responsibility at that company. The Flatiron Building is going residential. The Brodsky organization has bought a stake in the storied Landmark building and is teaming up with its owners to convert it into high-end condos. This according to The Real Deal. The property went up for auction in the spring, and its owners could not agree what to do with the vacant building. The auction turned into a circus when then unknown investor Jacob Garlick came out of nowhere and placed the winning bid at $190 million, but failed to come up with a deposit. That resulted in a new auction where one of the owners, Jeff Gurl's group, won the bid at $161 million. The owners then sought a new investor to come in and finance the conversion. They then brokered the deal with Brodsky. The exact plans for the building are not entirely clear. Marketing materials for the property show that it could be converted entirely to residential or half residential, with the other half remaining either office building or going to hotel use. Brodsky, meanwhile, has been busy developing other residential properties. The company recently teamed up with Avery Hall Investments to develop a 350-unit residential building in Gowanus. Brodsky is also developing a pair of rental buildings at the Pacific Park megaproject. And the U.S. economy surged in the third quarter as a strong job market and falling inflation gave consumers the confidence to spend freely on goods and services. The gross domestic product, the primary measure of economic output, grew at 4.9% annualized rate from July through this September, according to the Department of Commerce. The pace exceeded forecasts and was the strongest showing since late 2021, defying predictions of a slowdown prompted by the Federal Reserve's interest rate increases. The acceleration was made possible in part by slowing inflation, which lifted purchasing power even as wage growth weakened and a job market that has shown renewed vigor over the past 3 months. But that level of spending by higher income earners in turn fueled robust job growth in service industries like hotels and restaurants, even as sectors that benefited from pandemic shopping trends like transportation and warehousing returned to more normal levels. There are indications that consumers are running out of dry power. Disposable personal income, adjusted for inflation, decreased in the quarter, as did the personal savings rate. And as expected, Governor Kathy Hochul signed a bill replacing the expired J51 build a program and another that expands the city's housing agency's loan authority. She also approved a measure that increases the housing department's corporation's bonding capacity to $19 billion. The new J51 is now an abatement only that lasts for up to 20 years for For rental buildings to qualify, at least half of the units must be affordable, part of the state's Mitchell-Lama program, or receive substantial government assistance. Landlords were not impressed about the changes to the program, saying the obstacles to eligibility were not likely worth the trouble. And building owners, legislatures, and residents engage in a heated debate over curbing fines associated with the landmark climate legislation bill known as Local Law 97. In a tense virtual hearing last week, just months before the law takes effect. The 2019 legislation aims to cap the building's carbon emissions by fining properties and has seen significant changes as New York City approaches its first compliance period from 2024 to 2029. Mayor Adams and the Department of Buildings has proposed the building owners who make a good faith effort to comply with the law should be exempt from penalties. And earlier this month, 2 city council members introduced a bill to limit the law's enforcement. Roughly 89% of buildings above 25,000 square feet are in compliance with Local Laws 97's 2024 admissions target, but that leaves thousands of buildings that could be fined in 2025 for failing to decarbonize, with greater penalties coming down the pike through 2050. And finally, keep your checkbooks open. This is the message for New York City renters who still bear the burden of paying a landlord's broker fee, at least this year, according to the city council member who this summer tried to change the cover fee. Council member Tracie Hamersley introduced a bill in June that would require whoever hired the broker to pay their fee. But even after the bill gained the support of the majority of the council members, it's unlikely to come to a vote this year. Sky-high fees have helped raise awareness of New York City's unique broker fee system, but it is not the first time someone has tried to change it. Legislation proposed back in 2019 attempted to cap broker fees at 1 month's rent, though the law was struck down in court. The New York Department of State briefly blocked renter-paid broker fees in early 2020 under its interpretation of that law in 2019, but a subsequent lawsuit from the Real Estate Board of New York changed its guidance. All right, with me today are Louise Phillips Forbes from Brown Harris Stevens, Tracie Hamersley from Douglas Elliman, Anna Shagalov, Brown Harris Stevens, Matthew Cohen, Brown Harris Stevens, and Johnny Cheeks, owner and principal of My Beautiful Home Design. Johnny began his career in lobbying and government affairs within the real estate sector, working with high-level business leaders, elected officials, and navigating complex regulations and policies. As great as those years were, Johnny was looking for something more fulfilling and meaningful. As he and his husband renovated their own homes, their friends and family began asking them for advice, which led to launching their own residential construction and interior design company, My Beautiful Home. Fueled by his dedication to creating exquisite, functional homes, Johnny transitioned to a world that could blend his enthusiasm for real estate with his creative spirit. The mission at My Beautiful Home is to eliminate the assumption that hiring a fully in-house design team is pretentious, unpredictable, and just for the lucky few. Johnny received his bachelor's degree from Pace University, and he resides in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. Good morning.
Good morning.
And thank you for joining us. So listen, I mean, that's a quite impressive resume, and doing a little more digging and reading before today. Tell us a little bit about how you actually came from your background to decide to come into design and what it sort of means to you today.
So I'm pretty sure all of us can agree here that even if you haven't worked in politics, you just know that working in government affairs is you can't be creative. And
soul stealing.
Soul stealing. It's, not fulfilling in a way. So over the years, my now husband and I, when we were just dating, it was only a couple of years at the time, we would do just slight moderations or modifications to our apartment. And then in 2017, we purchased a property in Bay Ridge, which was fine for most people, but for us, we gutted it down to the studs while also living in the property at the same time, which...
Double wow.
Been there, done that.
God bless you.
If you want to
still
test...
together.
Yes, 10 and a half years later. But if you want to test your relationship, by all means, live in a renovation.
Drop a baby in that
Yes.
during the construction.
Just renovation full stop. I mean, that on its own is enough to test relationships.
Right. So as insane as that was at the time, we really enjoyed the process in which construction and renovating, how you handle it on that type of scale. And when it came to designing the place with colors and textures and even furniture placement. We really enjoyed it and would sit on our stoop at the end of the night and just ask ourselves, what if we did this for other people one day? So it really was just a pipe dream with really no intention of starting something. And he has a finance background, and again, I have the government affairs background, which was in real estate, which was great because I'm dealing with DOB all the time. So had I not known those things.
Inside track to DOB is always a blessing.
Yes.
Good to know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So friends and family would ask us for help, just like, oh, can you help me find a place where I can find a good couch or a paint color on the wall? And my cousin one day was like, when are you going to quit your job and do this full time?
Nice.
And in the beginning, it started as doing the lobbying on one hand and then the construction interior design on the other. And
Sleeping not at all.
exactly. So it got to a point where it just kind of took off, and I didn't have the capacity to do the lobbying on my own. And at that point, I was burnt out. I think COVID there's a silver lining in it,
Yes.
which really aligned
For a lot of
our
people.
goals. As rough as those years were, taking the good things from that. And we just started simply as just decorating people's rooms. I remember my first job was a $200 decorating job. I took that just to get something on my portfolio.
Does that even exist? $200. Is that picking
We're
out
gonna
paint
get a lot of
colors?
DMs like, wait a minute, 200, can
Putting
you
a
give me
plant
that?
in my bathroom.
Yeah.
So
Call me, I'm interested.
Right. So we eventually evolved quite quickly to becoming a fully licensed and insured construction team. So we're a design build firm. We build properties from the inside out. We don't do ground up construction in New York just yet, although we are starting to do that on the riverfront in New Jersey. So we really get to know our clients at a very personal level because they simply don't have the capacity themselves to design and handle a construction on their own.
They may not even know what they like and don't like.
Exactly.
And so that is a delicate balance of figuring out their psychology.
Yes.
But as you indicated, when we've all been through, I know Weezy's been through renovations, we've all been, I've lived through almost a gut myself in the apartment at the time, and it was like the
Me
worst
too.
thing I've ever done.
It's not fun.
We'll never do it again. My question, though, is, based on my experience and based on other friends who have gone through this, it's not for the faint of heart. So it makes, I believe, the designer's job that much more difficult to kind of not only figure out, as Weezy said, what they want, because generally speaking, they probably don't know what they want, and then also manage their expectations and manage
Their budget.
their budget too, but also their patience level, because they're getting into stuff that they've never done before. How do you make that happen? I'm going to use the word seamlessly.
Seamlessly is a word that we're using lightly here.
Pipe dream.
But
Very
also
lightly.
factoring in if they're not on the same page design-wise.
Right. So
Yeah, exactly.
communication is essential, especially on the logistics side. It's funny, when it comes to renovating a house with a construction team, the design aspect is always at the forefront in the beginning, but you don't really see that come together until the very end. So what people tend to be mostly overwhelmed is when they walk into their place that they spent a lot of money on and there's no walls. So we are always telling them each and every day what has to be done, even in the initial consultation. But once the project begins, we tell them, this is what happened today. This something came up, but we have the contingency budget set aside for this problem if that does arise. And this is what's going to happen tomorrow. And we do our damn hardest to ensure that we finish projects on time, and most importantly on budget. And budget is and we'll get into this later on as we know, but budgets ultimately affect a renovation drastically and what you can do. I always say that HDTV is not real life.
Neither is $1 Million Listing.
Right.
Reality TV.
Selling
No.
sunset.
Non-reality.
So you can't just finish a full gut property in 30 minutes, and they make it look even that much easier. But our mission at My Beautiful Home is to change that perception, to make people feel secure that they're with a team that will never leave them hanging, to make sure that the project is done and ultimately functional and beautiful for them and their families.
All right. So with
I'm
your
sorry, Vince, I just have to say
Go
the
ahead.
daily communication, the daily reports is so novel, and so as someone who has also gone through renovation, I would have loved for my contractor to have.
Yeah,
That's unbelievable, or project manager. And
Yes.
it's really
100%. But combining, good point. But combining the contracting and the project managing and the designing all in one.
Yes.
I mean, that to me, presents
People need information.
the
Otherwise,
ultimate solution.
Totally.
we fear the
Right.
unknown. If you know
Yeah.
there was this issue, but we're on it, we can fix it. I mean, just to know the status
And-
is amazing.
And we don't leave them hanging portion.
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, at the very end, all of those little things that need to be addressed.
The little
and
tiny-
And the designer and the contractor are just gone.
And-
they're
Correct.
on to
They've
the next.
moved on to the
Yeah.
next big
yeah,
thing.
they're on to the next.
And you'll hear me say this a lot, but every client is different. So the needs of each client is never the same. It's like a fingerprint. So a lot of general contractors don't understand that.
Yep.
But we take that very seriously, and we treat every project like it's our own, as if we were living in the space.
That's great.
Even if it's not my personal style per se, we make sure that they're treated that way.
I think that there's there's a very similar process that we have in our journey in educating our buyers, and the therapists that we become, and that but really listening and hearing is the master, and it really is what gives us our success. If we can really acclimate and pivot to what they're saying, and then they experience it, we're leading them.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of marriage that you're talking about.
Exactly, and it's also introducing them to things that they may not have been aware of. We do this every day as a living. Our clients, they are
take for
in various
granted.
fields. They don't
Right.
know where to look for.
That's
a
why they've
certain
hired you
material.
as the expert.
Exactly. So, unlike a general contractor, we are making sure that we get the right materials, but understand their style too, to make sure that it's exactly what they want.
So my question is about style, because the way that I've renovated my city apartment and my weekend home, very simplistic. But then I walk into other people's homes and I'll see this crazy wallpaper that I just wish I had the courage to use, or like some crazy paint color. So to have you by their side saying, I know this is what you said, but how awesome is this? And they say, okay,
Yes.
let's give it a shot.
Yeah,
and then it's just like the
taking
best thing.
risk.
You're saying Johnny could have convinced you?
Yeah, you definitely could have.
Yeah.
I mean, that creative aspect of it. I feel like what we do is also very creative, because we have to open their mind to what something can be.
Yes.
But to actually find that wallpaper, put it up, I mean, I wish I could be in that field with you.
Which leads me to, based on your experience, based what Anna just said, because sometimes you want something, but you don't really know if it's correct, okay, or if it's really
too
going to work.
much, or if it's
And what we do as agents, I think, sometimes is when our clients ask our opinion, we always say, kind of keep things neutral. Don't be, painting bold colors and crazy color wallpaper, because at some point, even if you don't think so, you're going to be listing that apartment to sell. And when buyers come in and they see all this wild and crazy stuff that you may love,
To a specific taste, some people
to
can't get
specific
past
taste, it just may not work for the mass out there who's going to come in. But my question to you is, how do you show your clients, based on whether we send them to you, you find them on your own, whatever, how do you, make your clients understand what the value or the potential of their home could be? Because sometimes you walk in and it's in a state of disarray. Sometimes you walk in and it's completely already gutted, and they need somebody to come in and put it together. How do you make them understand what their home should look like based on who they are?
Well, we approach it depending on who the individual is. Some people, when we answer these questions, or ask these questions rather, ahead of time before we walk through a property. Some people prefer to have a big open concept, some people don't. And the way that we explain the potential of a property is contingent on those answers we get from them. If we see something that's completely open concept and they need a little bit more division in their property, we're not necessarily going to show them something that's completely open if their budget doesn't allow us to build up those walls. So a lot of times people tell us a budget that they have in mind. Sometimes they don't. We just quote them and we figure out whether or not that makes sense for them. Other times they have a budget that's completely unrealistic, and we do a lot of educating on what's involved in a renovation and how
That
much
sounds
it costs.
familiar.
Thinking the same.
Right.
But also from a design, perspective. So you always say that the key to a beautiful home is blending its original character, if
Right.
there is original character,
Yes.
in the place, with modern, elements and conveniences. So how do people take to that? Because everybody has a very different, sometimes very strong outlook on a taste. I like old, I like new, I like modern, I don't like any of it,
Yes.
And so what are you really looking for? How do you make them understand what's going to work for their environment?
So I usually tell our clients that design is all about balance. And going back to your statement about a bold wallpaper, I think everyone should have some sort of bold statement
something,
piece, whether it's
yeah.
a wallpaper or some sort of texture on the wall. Or
I need you to come to my home.
I would love to.
Tell me which one.
I would love it.
You want that wallpaper.
I want that wallpaper.
You're going to get it, Anna.
So regardless of what style that they love, and I think these design names are super subjective and people just make them up ultimately, and that's okay. We do it too. Just really going with your gut and seeing what it is that brings you joy, gives you that feeling that I have to have this in my house no matter what. People don't realize that questions that we ask aren't necessarily always direct, but they tell us things that really curate that design ultimately at the end. So we
So
take
you have
it.
to pay attention.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
and I will just say that I did my entire space in Montauk around my orange stove.
Good for
just
you.
to be
I
clear.
love that you
I
have
love that.
I
you
love
have
that
an orange
stove.
stove.
That's awesome.
amazing.
I know the stove you're talking about, and
That's
it's beautiful.
fabulous.
I love that.
An orange stove. I gotta love that.
Is it
Love
Bertazzoni?
that.
No, it's not.
But you also
Is
embarked
it the
upon.
Cornu?
No.
Like-
I'm in Montauk, honey, in the trailer park. No,
That's awesome.
You're not in a trailer park, sweetie. Trust me.
I am.
Okay.
I'm on
But
the beach.
I don't believe it. No, yeah, on the
It's a
beach
double
you are.
wide, just to be clear.
Southern girl.
Next. Okay, so you embarked upon a major renovation also on West End Avenue where you
Yep.
live. So tell us a little bit about that because if I remember correctly, it's a duplex. So
It's
you
a
put
duplex.
two apartments together. How long did that take and what kind
Did you
of
live through
guidance
it?
I
did you
lived
have?
through it with a 2-year-old and a newborn.
Right.
Wow.
Just to say,
Yikes.
I was angry for about 2 years, and I was converting 4 buildings, not one but 4. We did 200 transactions that year.
That's when I met her,
Wow.
or knew her, yeah.
It was very challenging. However, and I was also like, when I went to go look at rentals to move out of, I was like, it was going to cost at least $50,000 for me to do 6 months. And I was like, that's my master bathroom. I'm not.
Yeah.
So, and it's an up and
Suck it up,
down.
buttercup.
So we lived
stir it up.
downstairs. They gutted upstairs. I had a refrigerator in my foyer. I had a microwave in my laundry room and a coffee maker. God forbid we need one of those.
I like your priorities.
So that was what we chose to do.
And now you have a great story.
It was a great story, and Douglas, who's now 20, literally was like, "Mommy, can you not take my toys away again?" When I brought his toys. But
I don't know where to find them. Put 'em
from a
somewhere.
design standpoint, we went through quite a journey. We ended up moving the kitchen to where a bedroom and a bathroom was.
Oh, cool.
Which was really bold, and I closed off 2 service exits. So it was just an interesting. It's 10 rooms, and I had to go through my process of setting up to have my layout to be a certain way, only to realize that if I took a bolder approach, it could be really unique. So I'm really glad that, and our staircase turned out beautiful, which they only had to put in 3 times, not once.
Oh, gosh.
But,
God bless you.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because when you mentioned about the resale value of a property, and one of the questions that we ask is, what's your plan? Is your plan to stay here forever? Is your
They
plan
will
to
tell you
stay-
probably yes, most of the
believe it or
time.
not,
Size of the
they
apartment.
say a
Yeah.
few years.
Really?
They don't really.
They
People
put
don't know
that much into it?
People don't
That's-
know what they're doing tomorrow, let alone what they're doing 20
In this
years
town,
from
for
now,
sure.
So we want to make sure that what we introduce to them is beautiful and they love it, obviously regardless of taste. But you want to make sure that when it does go up for sale in a short period of time, that it's not turning people off.
Correct.
So
yeah,
specific.
I think it's also, we used to, my parents' generation was the house that we grew up in, and it was that they never moved. I have clients I've sold 9 transactions with. It
Never
is-
moved and never renovated.
And that's true. And I will say that today's buyer is much more of a mindset where you don't stay in the same job very long, particularly the millennial generation.
Yeah.
And they have come to learn that it's an opportunity for creating wealth. And 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2. It equals 2.2, 2.5 of that sweat equity that you put in if you make those right decisions.
Exactly.
But also those younger people like change. You know what I mean? They like change where like the older generation was kind of averse to change, and
That
so
used
we
to be
like
you,
doing.
Ken.
Hey, you know,
Don't be fooled by the hair. Matt is the voice of the younger generation on this
we
show.
like to do something different, like every few years. Do you do mood and design boards with clients?
Yes, and it's ultimately how we get them to go forward with something that
Yeah.
they're reluctant with. Because you all know this, the people's ability to have a visual for the grand scheme of things
It's
is
hard.
it's hard.
Very, yeah.
So especially when we're talking about materials, we're talking about colors. Furniture placement is another thing that we can get into. But for the most part, when we're renovating the space just to make it ready for them to move in, we're like, this is the reason why we picked this floor color. This is the cabinet color that we're moving with. These are the cabinet pulls. It's all these little details that people miss. But it's what all these details make that bigger picture.
Yes.
And for us, sorry to interrupt, Matt. I mean, for us, when we show, it's those details
Yep.
that make it really special and unique and helps actually sell the apartment.
Right.
Absolutely.
Do you like when people come to you and they're like, I saw this in a magazine and I kind of want to do it. I want to make it look like this. Or like I went to AD and like I was watching Neil Patrick Harris's house and like I love what he did. Do you like when people say
Or
that?
like if somebody
I
comes
love
in with
Neil.
a picture of like a hotel in Tulum and you get and they
Right,
have,
exactly.
and the post for 8 foot your apartment. You make it look
Change
like this.
it.
For the most part, the typical client that we get, they have no idea about any sort of style. Yes, they like lean towards one thing over another, but for the most part, they don't even know where to begin. So we're holding their hand throughout the entire thing. They're trusting us, more importantly. So we take it upon ourselves to really get to know them, like I said before, and then introduce a style that we think fits them and their needs.
It must be really rewarding to like watch that evolution of their thinking and their
Oh, yeah.
thought process.
When they wake up.
And then when they wake up, but then
No,
the end,
it's an epiphany.
But then the end
Totally.
product, they're like, I wow.
Never imagined
it's
I
like,
could
wow
have a
moment.
home
All right,
like
let's hold the
this.
thought. We have to take a break. We're coming right back to continue this really fascinating conversation. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. All right, Johnny, so, based on this conversation, talk a little bit about budgets, and can you talk about projects where you had to work within a specific budget based on what the client said? And as we said before, clients don't always know what they need. So basically, they sometimes don't always know what their budget should be. So how do you work with them? How do you handle that? And then, I'm going to go on record as saying there's always going to be overages. And anybody here who's renovated knows it's never the number you get. It's never the timeline you get. It's always going to be longer, and it's always going to be more costly. At least that was
100%. No,
my
there's no exception.
experience.
No
In the 2 times I did major renovations, it was like hair pulling. So tell us about budgets and how you work the client into understanding what they really need.
Well, before I get into that, I got to ask you, was it because you saw something later on in the renovation that you just
Scope
had
change?
to have? Was it a change of change order?
Excellent question. Yes, it was a change.
Of course.
Because that's why projects
I was like,
go
no, that's
over
not going to
budget.
work for me. I want to do this.
knew
And
the
he's like,
answer already.
okay,
Yes.
sure, but it's going to cost you a little more money. Well,
Yeah. So regardless of how much someone has to spend on a renovation, everyone has a budget. Everybody. And a timeline too, which is even more difficult to stay in. For example, a lot of our clients are coming from real estate brokers who are working with people who are buying a property. So they have a rental, for example, and they have to be out of that rental by a certain time. And their new place is a total gut job, and it has to be done right when their lease is ending. So that's a very, very tough challenge.
Airbnb.
Yeah. So usually they stay in their apartment. Every scenario is always different. Like we always think that we haven't seen it all until the next client comes in. But ultimately, once we get to know what they're looking to do in the space as we're doing the walkthrough, that's how we come up with our scope of work, and then line by line go through it on a call or a Zoom to make sure that they understand exactly what they're getting themselves into. Obviously, they have the peace of mind that they're working with people like us because we want this project to get done just as quickly as they do. But it's definitely a process where we make sure that we go through room by room any imperfection that we see or anything that causes a red flag, that we pin it and we make sure that gets fixed. Because once you start with one fix in one room and then another fix in a different room, that's adding time to your timeline and can ultimately affect when these people can move in.
How often do you run up against a project, okay, where, as we all said here, the owners of the apartment are going to stay in the apartment as you're working in it versus, okay, I'm going to rent something for a month, 2 or 3, and then come back when it's all done. How often are people in the space? And then how complicated does that make the whole project?
It makes it very complicated and more costly
Yes.
too.
Yeah,
Yes.
well, I
6
know.
months. It cost me 6 months.
Yeah,
It's
me
not
too.
ideal, and if the project is, if it's one room, it can kind of get away with it.
Well.
You know, I recently quoted someone for 2 bathrooms in their co-op in the Upper East Side, where they wanted both done, but they needed at least one bathroom to be functional. So
You can live without a kitchen. You can't live without a bathroom.
well, I lived without a kitchen for 4 months, but I won't get into that.
So did I.
Nice.
Me too.
6.
So we did a scenario where we did one bathroom, finished it, and then moved on to the next one. Although still doing it relatively quickly, but trying to disrupt things as little as possible. Ideally, mostly our clients aren't in the properties just yet because they're acquiring them. They're purchasing it, they're closing, and then the renovations start. So they understand that they can't move in just yet for most of our projects. Although, when it does come up where they have to move in, it just you have to cover things. You want to protect their furniture, right?
Totally.
We advise them to keep things outside of the apartment or the property until it's done. But we have to cover things up. We have to move things around, and it makes the project go by even longer.
So one of my exes is a very big interior designer, and I think the issue with budget and delays, which I always love that he said this, he would be like, the issue is when you're a real estate broker and you're helping someone buy a home, you advise them on what they need versus what they want. And that's how you kind of make them more realistic. But in interior design or, renovations, it's all want versus need.
Yeah.
That's the issue.
Johnny, let me ask you, do you ever go with real estate agents with clients to walk through a place they're considering purchasing and provide some kind of budget or something? to
Very,
help them
very,
make the
very good
decision?
question. Very good
Okay.
So
question.
that's one of our services that
That's
we
great.
provide. So when one of your clients is just looking at a property and like, oh, how much does it cost? How much would it cost roughly to revamp this entire space? We can provide a rough range just based on listing photos alone if they're in the early stages.
Right.
However, if it's something that they keep bringing up or going back to a certain property or they've made an
wanna
offer
fine-tune the numbers.
or they're in contract, then we do a site visit in person and do a full scope of work.
Great
So
relationship.
I have
Yeah.
that's amazing. I mean, because I've built or converted so many buildings and I've done so many renovations for my sponsor, I kind of have the back of the back of the envelope numbers, what bathrooms and
Yep.
electrical and the buckets of money. But today I'm finding that the managing agents are becoming more and more challenging because they want a third party. Douglas Elliman Management, for example, wants they have a third party insurance company advising them, and what they're asking these contractors to use today are standards for commercial. If you're going to be doing point work,
You're not wrong.
so
You're right.
The
You're
cost
correct.
for insurance and the time value of money to get these things approved, and what the little guy, your company, would be challenged with. Are you finding any of that stuff changing
Well,
and shifting?
being licensed and insured is essential to do any projects here, but that's
Of
our,
course.
it's our biggest overhead, and working in an environment like New York is incredibly complex, especially when you're renovating in Manhattan.
Or a co-op condo versus a townhouse. I'm
Right,
sure.
and co-ops and condos operate differently. Their rules are different. I mean, they're similar, but there are some
But
stark
they're very
differences.
different.
co-ops
Yeah,
are-
very, very
co-ops,
different.
Yeah, co-ops are very complicated, and every board is different. So, but to answer your question, yes, there are definitely a lot of challenges when it comes to working in specific properties. And yes, you can kind of have a rough range as to how much to do a bathroom of a very standard size in a
Sure.
co-op. But until you get into the property and you see exactly the condition that it's in, the sizing, and it ultimately comes down to the materials that clients choose to use. You can go as little as 99 cents a square foot on a subway tile, which, don't get me wrong, very versatile, and you can make it look very elegant for not a lot of money for the lower budget jobs. Or you can spend up to $150 per square foot on a tile.
Yeah.
It really all depends on what they want. We obviously know that once a budget is set, you can only spend X amount on each material that's being brought in. So that as our job and what we do that's different than general contractors usually is to introduce those materials that fit their budget and their style. but ultimately make them very happy, but without going so over that they're going to lose their return on investment.
Sure,
Because overinvestment is a big
You can
thing, and
overimprove a
we want to
place.
make sure we
Yeah.
advise against that. Obviously, we have clients that were like, they slam their hand on the table and they say, I have to have it. And then obviously it's their
That's on
property.
them. Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's all about striking that balance. But when it comes back to doing the walkthroughs, yes, we can do that very, very easily for you. And we want to be a resource for real estate brokers.
excellent.
Correct.
I actually have a very, excuse me, I have a very specific question for you. Number one, in co-ops and condos, how many people ask you if central air is possible? I was just wondering about this.
It is possible.
Great
It's just-
question.
It's just
Yeah.
very, very costly when you do the traditional HVAC. Because
And if the building allows it.
correct.
Yeah.
And you lose a window and the ceiling.
Well,
is not that
traditional
great.
HVAC, you have to rip the walls out.
Right.
So if you're down to the studs already, then that's the time to do it.
Sure.
A
It's the
really
difference between 50,000 and 80,000 or 100,000.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, and a great alternative has been that we tend to install just because from a budget standpoint are the split units like Mitsubishi, other names escape me,
Sure.
but they're all very similar.
The air handlers.
They're not the most beautiful pieces of appliances, I would say.
No, they're
'cause
They're
not.
efficient.
But they're very efficient,
Yeah.
and you can zone them. So if you're not in one room, you keep it off, and you just use the ones in the rooms that you're in, and it keeps your monthly bills down. They're very efficient. They're not the most beautiful. However, once they're up, you kind of forget that they're even
Exactly.
there.
They don't bother me.
And they both do air conditioning and heating.
Heating. Well, right, exactly.
Yeah.
So follow up. What is
So how can I central air condition my home, right?
Right.
Take this
I
offline,
wish.
babe.
Yeah.
My co-op is so strict; they would never allow anyone. What is the most popular question you get asked when renovating someone's place? Like what they want or what they need, or even what's possible.
I think, and I use the word trend, not so frequently because I think there's a stigma behind the word. However, what people tend to really want is a kitchen-centric property. So usually a kitchen is the most important room to get done, but it's also the most expensive. So we understand that your limitation, like if you're in a galley kitchen co-op, you can't necessarily expand that footprint unless there's a wall that you can take down. So you really have to look at the property and see what's possible, what walls you can take down, what you can't.
I know you want to ask me.
No,
a
no,
question,
no, go
but I
ahead,
want
go
to
ahead.
ask you a question about, because I have a kitchen that's like 19 by 16, and to price out with 3 windows, and it's 4 size.
Oh, that sounds like my dream home.
And
Nice.
but
The
my
size of a studio
pricing for
apartment.
my kitchen cabinets. So I want to know, I had to value engineer in certain places. If you go with a name brand, whether it's Small Bone Kitchens, you're talking about $150,000, whereas I had my bids for my cabinets alone from $35,000, which is the one we took, to $175,000.
Oh, yeah.
So what is your take on name brands and paying for the zhuzh?
Premium. Yeah.
With cabinets especially, there's so many out there, but it ultimately comes down to what people have to spend. And as contractors, we have relationships with a lot of vendors where we get better pricing than, say, if someone who was just renovating their own
So
space.
custom, you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, there's semi-custom, standard, semi-custom, fully custom. When it comes to the much higher-end cabinets, there are details that most people have never seen in their lives, like the
And they're not going to miss them.
Right.
Maybe.
They're not
Exactly.
necessary.
Although
The
I
hinge,
think
the
I think
hidden
they're
hinge.
stunning.
Yeah.
I would love
Of
to
course
every
you do.
project.
Yeah, it's
But, and another thing with custom cabinetry is their lead time.
Yeah.
So
Right.
we have we buy properties and we'll flip them, and we actually started to use them in other projects for clients because they're so great and they're quick. Where we just measure on Monday and they're delivered by Friday, which is very unheard of. Whereas a super custom high-end cabinet lead time is on average 12 to 16 weeks.
I mean, I just
And during
built an
COVID,
entire
yeah.
building where they were literally built in Italy. And
Which are
so
beautiful.
they're
Yeah.
beautiful, but they were on a boat in the Hudson trying to get through the
Forever.
port. Yeah,
Well,
so that is a challenge
So
also.
if you have the time and the means to get something that's ultimately very expensive and high end, please do it. But again, our average client they have a timeline where
Yeah.
they're in another place and they got to get in by a certain time. So
But just
we
another,
make sure
but a
that we
follow up to
don't
what
do
Louise is
that.
saying, though, when you can get a range, for example, on kitchen cabinets, okay,
Yes.
and you can talk about anything, but kitchen cabinets, okay, $35,000 to $175,000. I mean, look, even if you can afford it, and even if you
seems
think
ridiculous.
you're going to stay there for 10
Yeah.
years, to me, it sounds a little outrageous.
It is.
Because if you do decide to sell in 5 years, you're going to try and get that money back in an asking price, and you're not going to.
You're not.
And if you
So if you can
damage
live
it,
with
too.
$40,000
Right.
cabinets or $50,000 cabinets, what's the difference?
Right.
At the end of the day, you're not going to put something in you hate.
No.
So
Right.
If it looks
choosing
nice,
something that's 35,000 versus
100%.
175,000, you're still going to choose something that you love.
Yeah, and
Exactly.
for me, I elected to spend $50,000 on my master bathroom and butterfly my slabs, and you know what I mean.
Priorities are different for
Yeah,
everyone.
it just.
And I like what you
Right.
just said. I don't think anyone heard it, but also if you damage it.
Yeah.
I mean,
and then the
like,
repairs are costly.
I put these.
Right.
I have this vision that I always wanted black floors. I have these like beautiful black wide plank floors in my apartment.
Get a vacuum
And-
cleaner.
Yes.
And like people damage it. I mean, people come to the apartment, like
Fall off
chairs move.
chairs.
Vince fell off a chair, like killed one of the floors.
Vince.
Like, I mean, you know, it's
He hasn't let me live it
Thank
down.
God
hurts.
Vince is okay. Thank God Vince is okay.
No. It was only about the floor. It was not about the floor.
I just want to say,
Vince
I'm
is on
having
his ass,
FOMO.
but he's like, "You just damaged my floor." I'm like,
Like,
"Okay."
it hurts
I
your
wasn't there
soul.
either.
Yeah.
It hurts your soul. I mean, are people still doing a ton of IKEA cabinets? Like,
We actually had a prospect where they
Those
got
look
a good
nice.
price on IKEA
Yeah.
cabinets, but they're very complicated. We put them together for them if they really want them, but it's not cost effective, and the quality is okay. They're not terrible, but why would you do something where everybody else has it? And that's another thing. Like, we want to make the space unique to
Yeah.
our clients.
I have a high-end client who did an IKEA kitchen but customized
Oh yeah, that's
that, and it
That's
was
a very
beautiful.
different-
beautiful.
That's a
Very,
whole.
very
That's a whole different
Yeah,
thing.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's a whole
But it
different
was
thing.
still
So
still
cool.
cost effective.
Yeah.
So cool.
It wasn't like
I've seen
smokeless.
people buy IKEA shelves and then put arches in them and then made them look like built-ins in
Right.
a living room, which
Right.
is really nice.
Well, again, working with the right person, you can kind of customize anything to make it look even more expensive than it actually
Exactly.
is, right?
The hardware itself.
Right. The hardware itself
Hardware
is
dresses
a
up so
biggie.
many
Oh,
things,
absolutely,
yeah.
100%.
Yeah, I mean, hey, I have white lacquer cabinets in my apartment that are IKEA,
beautiful.
and I have gray lacquer custom cabinetry in my home out east, and I can't tell you the difference. like I'm truly like, if it wasn't the color, they're the same.
Yeah.
Like truly
That's
the
Right.
same.
Well, but
Yeah.
that's basically what it is. All right. So you guys, when you're out with buyers and they decide they want to make an offer on an apartment, but they say, "Well, my God, this needs a renovation," and you think, "Oh, wow, this is going to take a major renovation." How quickly are buyers today, okay, in this particular market, which I call kind of weird and strange? How quickly are buyers today willing to take on a project? First of all, buy the apartment, okay, and then take on a renovation project that could be 6 months or more or greater.
Right.
Where are we with that? What are the stats on that today?
I will say that for myself, look, it's not new information that apartments or townhomes that need a full gut is an elongated sales cycle. I mean, the
Yes.
time value of money,
Right.
the cost of money, paying on two places while you're doing the renovations, those are challenging. However, there are so many buyers, and I was late because I was on the phone with somebody who's going to be doing a renovation who said, "No, I'm not renovating." But 14 months later, she was like, I love this apartment.
I'll renovate.
And she can make it her own.
Right.
And honestly, everything that we loved that was done, she had to undo many things. So if you just lean into it and you look at it as an adventure, I think that it's really about how you can get what you really want. And I think statistically, it's all about pricing. So everybody thinks that yesterday's prices, my neighbor got this last year. Well, today is that the buying power is different.
What a
So-
broken
Rates are
record.
here. Yeah.
but
What a
this
broken
is
record.
when every person who fastens their seatbelt, this is when you get the deals.
Mm-hmm.
The deals, when money is expensive, you buy, and something that's a diamond in a rough. I just
been on
had
the
a
market
townhouse.
forever.
I had a townhouse listed. I had 4 days, 30 people through the door. We went 7 figures 7.5 figures above the asking price, and we had 5 offers. And that needs a 3-year renovation.
But
Call me.
Call you.
Call
But
me.
again, as you said though, when you find that right space and you find the space that's going to work for you, regardless of what in a townhouse, I'm assuming they can afford a renovation project. But when you find that space that works for you, Anna knows. She showed. I had a 3-bedroom listing in Gramercy Park on the market for 2.5 years. Oh my gosh. 2.5 years. I mean, out of COVID and
great potential.
7 Lexington.
yes.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, the buyer who came in said, "This needs a gut renovation." And I said, "Well, of course it does." And she said, "I'm up for it.
Amazing.
I want to do it." Why? Because she looked at the space and realized that this could be for her. It can be spectacular. And when you take a couple of walls down and you reconfigure things and open the kitchen, it will be a showplace.
Have you seen
Fortunately,
it since she's done
I
it?
have. She hasn't finished it yet,
okay.
and she's not my client. Unfortunately, she came with a broker. But I'd say I'd like to sell that someday because we got whatever we got for it, but we can get a hell of a lot more. In this case, because we had to lower the price a little bit to accommodate the need for a gut renovation.
To get back to your original question, though, Vince, I would say there is definitely still a premium for places that are completely turnkey,
Totally.
et
Absolutely.
cetera.
For sure.
And those are fewer and far between because a lot of those owners aren't selling them right now, at least in this market. I have a few buyers I'm working with that are seeing the value or that just come in with their teeth wet, their appetite wet to do a renovation project.
Yeah.
But that's a smaller percentage. I don't know the exact figures, but
I
it's
think
definitely the
buyers
majority.
are very price sensitive right now.
They're very, and we've seen and heard, as I'm sure you're experiencing, Johnny, like all the backlogs and inventory and the more expensive products and all of that. So that's all factoring in.
All right, we have to take a break. We'll wrap up right after this. Don't go anywhere. Okay, we're back. So let me ask about staging, because staging in our world, especially, and Louise, I do the same thing. We all have done new developments, and empty apartments are a nightmare. People have no vision, and I've said this
They look smaller
21
than
years.
furnished apartments.
They do. And so people come in and they want to see something. I mean, I joke all the time when I'm teaching one of the classes I teach. If one more person comes into an empty apartment that I have listed and says, so, I mean, you can look at them and the smoke is coming out of their ears and they're just kind of turning around. And I say, what's up? What are you thinking about? Because I know exactly what I'm going to hear. And they're standing in the middle of the living room, for example, and they say, so, I'm just trying to figure out where I could put the TV.
Yes.
Okay, what's Vince's classic line? You got 4 walls, pick one. Okay? I don't care where you put it. Next is, all right, so if I pick that wall and I put the TV over there, where then, and they're looking around. Serious, okay? They're not playing.
sure.
So then where would I put the sofa? And I said, you got 3 other walls, pick one.
Or you can float a sofa.
Or you can
It
float.
doesn't have to have
No,
a wall.
But the
Yeah,
point
easily.
is, if you don't show people something when they walk into an apartment, right?
You have to tell a
Come on,
story.
Vince. Wait,
you
have
to
you
tell
guys
a
never?
story.
Have none of you done the? My wingspan is a classic couch, not a 9-footer, but my wingspan is a queen size bed. I go and do the visual demonstration.
You
of
have
this
to.
will fit here. This will
It's
fit
about
here.
this wide,
Yeah,
okay?
exactly. Come on, we've all done that, right?
When I've had
That's the
a
most
seller,
basic staging.
When I've had a seller that just absolutely refuses to spend any money on the staging. First of all, my partner and I sometimes do it ourselves.
Yeah. Well,
And
we've all done that.
We have some stored furniture that we use.
Even the
but
aero
if I
bed.
can't, I will blue tape.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
very
Floors.
smart.
Yeah.
To show what
Even
fits
that makes
where.
a difference. That is the most basic.
It's a visual
That's
thing.
smart.
So my question to you is, are we still doing as much staging as we were doing for
Absolutely.
years?
More
Yeah.
so.
More
I mean,
so.
I would say I do 50 a year for 50 a year that
Yeah.
I have done in the last 3 years. Maybe not quite 50, but at least 35 to 40 staged apartments every single year. And but the time value of money is unbelievable. Not only that, people, you really cannot experience. Like when I moved 6,000 pounds of furniture from Tennessee, I walked in my apartment and I'm like, holy moly, my stuff's not going to fit in here. And I'm pretty.
The furniture in Tennessee is heavier? Is that what you're saying?
It's my great-great-granddad
Everything's
is
bigger and
old-time
better
secretary,
in the
darling.
Of course, darling. Even being seasoned professionals, it is still counterintuitive. I get fooled every single time. You see something with
Yes.
furniture, it's moved out
Yes.
for whatever, and they're like,
Oh, the best
Yes.
is when you show 2 apartments
Yeah.
in the same building that are the same line, and you show them because one has a better view than the other.
Sure.
And then you see how different they feel because the furnishing is different, or one is
Correct.
empty versus.
they respond to the furnished one.
I
They were
also will
always,
say
always.
that through my years of development, I don't always agree with how the architects lay out the furniture because they like symmetry, which is actually not as practical.
Not livable.
And so I can think of an example specifically where Crystal Sinclair was doing our interior staging, and she has a very, very interesting eye. And anyway, the architect was putting the dining room table, in front of a window, as opposed to she spanned a banquette across 3 windows and pushed the 12-foot table.
Yep.
So that I had all this flow of space so that you could have 200 people in that room as opposed to the other structure. So I think it's interesting.
Yeah, no, the layout, getting stuff ready, as I call it, for showtime, is important because when people do come in, they have to be able to walk around, maneuver around, and one thing you don't want to do is be bumping into stuff because that makes the room look smaller, correct?
I used to get a ton of pushback on staging. I mean, we all do as agents because of the cost.
course.
But I've actually had a strategy recently that's been received really well, which is when I talk to a seller, instead of talking about like all the fluff and like all the great things, I'm like, we're in New York City where there's a lot of history. A lot of buildings are pre-war. Even post-war buildings are old. Every building, every apartment has issues. So I'm like, what do you think is the con of your apartment? Like, what do you think is the negative of this apartment?
Yeah.
And they'll tell me, and I'll be like, well, if you had staging, it would take someone's eye away from what
That's
you just
right.
said.
That's right.
You see all the cracks in the walls.
Yeah.
All the little the pinholes
Right.
in the walls.
Totally.
And buildings settle over the years. So
Exactly.
Change of seasons,
Yeah.
it gets worse over time.
Yeah.
I will
Exactly.
say sometimes we go with the virtual staging approach first, and I've had many examples of where it wasn't doing the job. We brought in the physical furniture to stage. Boom. We got
10
offers.
days.
One
Yeah.
of the problems
it's
I
kind of
have,
miraculous.
but one of the problems I have with virtual staging is I only use virtual staging when my seller says, absolutely not, I'm not paying
Same.
for it,
Same.
whatever.
because
And
it
it's
does
just-
help to get people in the door.
Right, and it's just too much for us as agents to bring
Right.
in stuff. I will use virtual staging then. But I find, though, that when people see the virtual staging, even though in big, bold
says
words it
virtually
says,
Before I
this
open the
has
door,
been virtually
I say,
staged,
oh, a reminder, the listing has been virtually staged.
and they walk in and they say, oh, did the owner move out already? There's no furniture here. Your photos online are like,
Nobody reads. Nobody reads.
No.
virtually
They read the
staged
price, the square
people
footage.
read, okay, read.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
Yeah.
Because then you have the same thing. Where do I put the TV? What about the bed? What about this? I want that. What's feng shui?
Yeah.
What is your
Okay.
take? What is your take on feng shui?
I know nothing about it. I know that people ask me about it all the time.
I just gave my
As far
sister a
as I
hard time
go.
about feng shui because she turned her room around, her master bedroom.
In
And-
accordance with the principles of feng shui,
No.
or she's violating them?
She's violating. She says, "No, I'm not." I said, "Yes, you are."
You can't have your. You can't have your.
There are certain things
You
that are just
cannot have
blockages.
your bed between a beam.
Yep.
Because you'll cut.
No,
your
she's got.
steps
You
like
walk in the
half.
door here, and the bed's over here
The
facing the
bottom
wall.
of the
It's
bed
like, no,
needs
it's
to be
wrong.
facing when you enter. I'm actually certified in feng shui.
Oh, you are.
I am. I've actually. It was one of the first things I did when I
Just
came to the
auditioning
business.
to be a member of
It
your
was
team now.
Another
I
Matthew.
heard.
Whatever. Okay.
I actually learned that most apartments in New York City don't even qualify for.
That's
feng
what I
shui.
was going to say. It's
Yeah.
the
They
space
don't.
is at a
Yeah.
premium,
They don't.
and you
Yep.
just want to put your furniture in and make it livable.
Sure.
Whereas
But there are
feng shui
people, though,
is
who will
difficult.
say that. That's why I'm a little, keyed into that because they say, well, where should the bed go? Because I understand it's got to be this way for feng shui. And I'm like, look, I'm not an expert, but I can tell you we have to walk in and look at the bed. That's all I
Right.
know. Not facing
Yes.
the door, but it's
Oh,
got to be
yeah.
over here looking
that's-
at the bed.
But
And
that's
it can't
why
be
you need to get.
blocking- It can't be blocking an entrance.
Right,
You never
correct.
want to walk into the back of a couch.
Correct.
Right.
But that's why you need to get certified. So you can say, I am the expert.
I have way too many things going on to be
I have a friend
certified.
who's certified that I can
Yeah.
consult with. I have an apartment that the furniture was custom built to literally take up the entire space. So the couch
wow.
I
has
hate
no,
that.
it's horrible.
Horrible.
And I cannot convince them that this is eating up the space and it feels way smaller.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
And I mean, people come in and I say,
But it's custom.
please, but it's
They
custom.
pay a lot of money for it.
The sectional
Oh,
is
absolutely.
like, it takes up literally 2 full walls
Oh, no,
where you
no,
cannot
no.
put a dining table.
Not in New
And I
York.
tell people, look, if you have or want big furniture, this is what it's going to look like. It's great.
That's a good line.
But if you have smaller pieces, please try to visualize
this.
your couch right here. You're sitting on it. You know how it feels when you're sitting on it. try to just like
Tracie can
visualize
do
that.
her span.
There's-
Yeah, exactly.
And I have
My
another
wingspan.
friend who can come in and do her span.
Yes.
I have another friend who can come in and do the feng
Advise
shui.
on
Hey,
Feng
we're
shui.
just all a team here.
yeah.
There's
I'm
actually this-
6 feet tall, 6'1", so
The
you know,
human yardstick, then.
no,
yes.
so beds are what 6 feet long. So
Yes.
oftentimes I'm laying on the floor saying,
I can
"Okay,
see
the bed's
that.
going to go out
That's
to
on
here."
brand.
That's on
That's on brand. I can see
Amazing.
that.
I've not done
I
that.
can
I
see
step
that.
it out.
Is that why your back is always dusty? I'm
Hello?
just kidding. I get it. It all makes sense now.
We must be nearing the end of the show.
And then
gloves
people
are
say to me, "Oh, okay, so that's where the end." And I'm like, "Yeah, at the end of my foot. That's where the end of the bed's going to be."
Yeah, and then you're like, can you help me out, please?
The end of
Yeah,
my
exactly.
size 13 foot.
Then Vince needs help getting up.
Yes. Hello. Yeah. But
Great,
so
Vince.
funny.
but this is what goes
the
on.
links we go to, the
love our
hardworking
clients, we
agents.
love our people, but sometimes when they walk into an apartment, it's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
You can only do
Where
so
do you
much.
live currently, right? Do you live someplace at all, right?
We are all educators. We are all
Indeed.
therapists,
Yeah.
and then our jobs
Amen.
are.
I always tell my
tertiary.
buyers,
Yes.
you cannot change the location. You
Cannot change the
cannot
view.
change the view unless something's going to be built, and obviously you're not going to sell it. But you can change within reason the interior. If you love the location, you love the view, and the size works for you, but the aesthetic isn't.
That's what you can change.
I have a question. So, how do you approach sort of a restoration where you're celebrating the pre-war and you're finding how we live today is different because we don't have our kitchens in the back, and how do you find that balance and when somebody really wants to restore the piece of history of what the period of the building is?
So that's one of our favorite projects. We're actually wrapping up a renovation on a townhome in Kensington, Brooklyn. And
love that area.
So
I do too.
It's
It's
a
beautiful.
it's a 1910 row house.
Ooh.
And
Amazing.
it was actually the bones of the property were pretty good. It was just so many walls, and there was this vinyl wood look all over the walls in every room possible.
On the walls.
Yeah,
Wow.
it was everywhere.
1976.
But there was beautiful stained glass. There was just so many great molding details that people would tend to just get rid of. But for us, we were like, we got to keep this. However, the layout was not conducive. There was no bathroom on the first floor. So we moved, after we knocked all the walls down, we got a better sense as to the best way to make a good flow that would be attractive to most buyers, because we are putting it back on the market next week, actually.
Oh, nice.
So we relocated the kitchen to where the dining room once was.
Did you keep the stained glass?
Kept the stained glass.
Okay.
We actually brought in new stained
You have to keep
new
the
stained
Yes, you
glass
always have
that
to keep the
looks
stained glass.
like
Yeah.
stained glass that we already had. We put it in another part of the house, but it was from a salvage salvage yard.
Awesome.
So we did that, and we modernized everything else. Added the bathroom on the first floor, added the bathroom in the basement, and redid the bathroom upstairs. Everything we touched.
All right, we love New York, everybody. We're going to come back with my thoughts of the week. Don't go anywhere. All right, my thoughts for this week. Normally, I have thoughts on our industry, but today is different. Hollywood is mourning the death of actor and comedian Matthew Perry. Perry, best known for his lovable and sarcastic character Chandler Bing on Friends, was found dead this past Saturday in a hot tub at his home in Los Angeles. Warner Brothers Television Group, which produced Friends, described the 5-time nominee as a comedic genius. We are devastated by the passing of our dear friend Matthew Perry, the studio said in the statement obtained by The Times just the other day. Matthew was an incredibly gifted actor and an indelible part of the Warner Brothers Television Group for many years. He was discovered unresponsive at his home around 4 p.m. on Saturday, according to law enforcement, but they did not cite a cause of death. No drugs were found at the scene, and no foul play is suspected. Though best known for Friends, Matthew had a storied career in television that spanned back nearly 4 decades, with his earliest credit in 1979 as a child actor. When he was a young man, he landed the role of Chandler only at the age of 24. He played with the greats of all comedy television: Matt LeBlanc, Courtney Cox, Lisa Kudrow, David Schwimmer, and Jennifer Aniston. Matthew Perry, dead at 54. May he rest in peace, and may his memory be a blessing. And that's our broadcast for today. Thank you for listening, and thanks to my guest for being here on set with me. As always, you can follow me on Facebook, on Threads, Instagram, or TikTok at Vince Rocco, or my website, thinkvince.com. Confucius says, choose a job you like and you will never have to work a day in your life. And the only person you need to try to be better than is the person you were yesterday. And to my listeners all around the world, from all of us at Talking New York Real Estate, thanks again for spending a part of your day with us. I will see you next time. Goodbye, everybody.